So it looks like it's this Deadlight that's causing the leak that comes out from underneath the cabin side paneling. So my first step is going to be to take this trim off the inside so that I can address the seal. Maybe I have to get to it from the outside too. I don't know yet. But the first thing I'm going to do is take this inside trim off. There's a lot of sealant in this groove inside the glass, just like there is outside. So with some difficulty, I got one piece of this interior trim off, but it's the only one I'm going to do because you can see right in here, lighting's terrible. I'm sorry you can't see it. Move over here. But right here, where the point of that putty knife is touching, that's the edge of the glass, which means the glass is installed from the outside, rests against this inside trim. So I'm going to have to take this off from the outside. This is what we're looking like on the outside, that trim. It's heavily varnished in. But I'm going to have to pull these bungs, carefully pry that trim off. And I should be able to get the window out and rebed it. So I'm going to center point this bung right here. And that gives me a place to put this 3/8 inch Forstner bit that I like to use to drill these out. So after taking just short of forever, I did get one piece of this trim off on the exterior. Here it is. Was slow going, getting the screws exposed and then pulling them out. Interestingly, this was installed with 3/4 inch machine screws into the wood, not wood screws. But this trim has to come off because obviously it needs to be rebedded. But I can't take the back trim, the interior trim off, because this glass rests against it on the inside. And the trim on the inside is an L shape with a flat that sits on the side of the cabin, and then it wraps around a little bit. And there's no way to pry that out without damage from the inside. So if I want to take the inside trim off too, I've got to take this outer piece off so that I can get the glass out from here, and the glass will come out from this side. So once I get the rest of this trim off in 7 or 8 weeks, then I can pull the glass out and see if I need to pull the interior trim or if I can just clean it up. Because honestly, all the sealing should happen on the outside. If water gets past the outside, you kind of want to know about it so you can address it. And a seal on the inside just makes kind of more of a hassle and ultimately isn't going to fix the problem. If you've got a leak going, it's going to come in. So what you want is to concentrate on your exterior seal and get that right. And this is a strange setup. I mean, the glass is inset a touch from the wood of the cabin trunk here. So when you put the trim on, it doesn't rest against the glass, which means you need a lot of sealant in that space. I think this is Boat Life, which is that silicone mixed with polyurethane gunk. So we're going to use something else when we rebed this. Anyway, one piece off, 3 to go. Looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 12, and 4 more screws, 16 more screws. So it took me, I don't know, an hour to get these 4. It did speed up by the end. The first one was a real head scratcher. I couldn't figure out what the screw was. Finally figured out they're flathead, slotted machine screws, bronze. So let's get the rest of this trim off. So I got the 6 screws out of the top in much less time than it took me to do the 4 in that forward piece. So I'm kind of learning the deal here. Let's pry this piece off. With substantial effort, care, and time, I got all this trim off. It was not easy. The first screw on the first piece really fought me, and I thought, oh my God, if it's going to be like this, I'll be here for weeks. But then it got easier. I got a sense of what the screws were like. But I had 2 screws here in this corner that fought me to the death. I had to drill them both out. And then this bottom piece of trim, the last piece I removed, just was so stuck, it just was not easy to pry off. So it took longer than I hoped. And it's late in the day. I'm not touching this glass right now. I'd like to take it out, but that's going to have to wait till another day when I'm fresh, after the frustration of getting this trim off. But it's all off. That's the worst part, I hope. Still got the interior trim to deal with. But I think once I get the glass out, it'll be easier to pry that trim off, and then I can clean everything up. So about 30 minutes work to get this glass out. It was well adhered all around the edges and against the back side of this trim. This is the trim from inside, and the glass rests against this face where my thumb is. And here's the glass. Came out intact. It was quite a process. It was a very tight fit in there, and it was very difficult to get started. Once I got the glass released, it was fairly easy to pull out the rest of the way, but it took some careful cutting, prying out as much of this old sealant as I could, inside and out. You can see all the detritus down there. But we've got it all out, all the trim's out. So the next step on this will be to clean up all this excess old sealant, clean the opening. I think one of the reasons this leaked is down here between the, this is an exterior wood veneer, fiberglass cabin side, interior wood veneer. There's a gap here, quite a gap. There was sealant in it to some extent, but this whole thing is, you know, a little separated from the fiberglass. So I think the first thing I'm going to do with this is I'll get some epoxy in there and just clamp this up so that those gaps aren't there. I'm not worried about it structurally or anything, but I think sealing up these gaps on both sides of this will help prevent the water from flowing in there. There is this is 2 pieces. This veneer, there's a seam right here, runs right through here, and that's loose. So I'll be very careful with that. I'll just glue that back up in place. It's all covered by the Deadlight frame anyway. But I'll be sure to scrape in this direction so I don't accidentally rip that off. Pretty much always wear these things now because not only do I like my eyes and I like to protect them, but these have magnifiers in them. And I really can't see close-up work anymore without them. Whoever said boat work was glamorous and romantic. A lot of stuff just like this. You can see here again on this inside, that veneer is a little loose. It's the direct passage of water down to where it was leaking. So I think epoxying that up, clamping this all together, will be of great assistance in the future. Ouch. Didn't I say I was going to be careful of that? Dumbass. The point of this sanding is just to clean up the last bits of the sealant that I couldn't scrape off. And I know I'm going across the grain here, but it's just where it's hidden. It doesn't matter. I'm sanding this edge down just a tiny bit. There's an edge of varnish there where the varnish was cut when I took the trim off. I'm just easing that a tiny bit. I just want to get this clean enough for new sealant. That's the goal here. So here's where we ended up after cleaning up this opening. Scraped and sanded out all the old sealant. Cleaned it out from the space here between the plywood and the fiberglass. Not plywood, it's solid wood. And I've got this clean enough. We'll do a solvent wash, obviously. But my first step's going to be to get some epoxy in these gaps and seal that up just around the opening. That way we can be sure that no water is going to get through there again. To seal these gaps at the bottom of the Deadlight opening, I installed some epoxy in there, thickened epoxy. I pushed it in with a brush. I used a putty knife to kind of hold the gap open, pushed stuff in, clamped it together. And here's where we ended up the next day with that epoxy all cured. The two veneers on either side of the fiberglass in the center are more solidly attached, and more importantly, the gap is filled. So any future water that makes its way in here is going to come out somewhere a little more obvious, like around the port frame itself. So this is ready to reinstall the lens and the trim. I've got the trim under varnish right now, just to do like a quick cleanup coat on the interior trim. It's probably all it's going to need, and a couple coats on the outside trim just to get it ready for installation, and then it'll get varnished again when I varnish all this bright work on the boat. So that's where we ended up.